Alright, I am back once again, and for the first time in a while, I am reviewing a Nikon rangefinder lens. Now, incidentally, even though this is a Nikon rangefinder lens, meaning it fits on a Nikon rangefinder, it is not a Nikon lens. It is in fact a Canon lens. And I think this is kind of an interesting departure from my normal stuff. As people know, I own quite a few Nikon rangefinders and lenses, and Canon made a lot of comparable rangefinder cameras and lenses. And early on, a lot of the lenses that were sold with or compatible with the Canon cameras were actually made by Nikon. They were labeled Nippon Kogaku most of the time. Sometimes I think they were given some other branding under Canon, but it's pretty obvious they're related to Nikon lenses. They have the same barrel design, they have the same overall design and the same aperture speeds and everything. Look very, very, very similar to the Nikon ones, just screw mount instead of having the Nikon S mount. So this is a pretty interesting lens because this seems to be the only lens that was made in the Nikon rangefinder mount. And when I say Nikon, I'm doing the air quotes there and you can't see me. But this was actually advertised as being a lens made in the Contax rangefinder mount. And the Contax and Nikon rangefinder mounts look the same. Technically, the measurements are a little different, and debatably, certain lenses don't transfer or cross over from one platform to the other, but there's surprisingly a lot of debate about it. I personally prefer to try to stick with Nikon as much as possible, but everybody seems to agree if you go with wider angle lenses like 35s and 28s, and even the wider like 21s, those wide angle lenses pretty readily transfer over from one platform to another. And you'll see that a lot of the generic lenses are something like a 35mm lens, sort of like the Kimura lens I have. And this Canon lens is no exception. It was advertised as being a lens for the Zeiss setup, but it obviously fits in a Nikon, and I fitted it on a Nikon, as you can see, and I went out and shot some photos with it. I've actually had this lens now for, I guess, a couple of months, but it took me a little while to get out and shoot with it, and I shot with it one weekend and came home and developed the film, and I had film, and I had a new developer, and I messed up the film and got nothing off of it, and I was kind of frustrated, and I went out again and shot a couple of rolls, and what you're seeing is results I shot very, very recently, just developed. So I think the results, all in all, are pretty good. I can't really say there's anything too distinct or miraculous about this lens. I know a lot of Canon fans really hail their 28mm rangefinder lenses and say they're some of the best out there, and a lot of people love the 28f3.5, and there's also a much rarer 28f2.8 that some people say is one of the better lenses in the Canon rangefinder selection, and it does look impressive. But I gotta say, all in all, it's very similar to the Nikon lens. That is as far as optics go. Now, interestingly, I will say that ergonomics are kind of different. When I got this lens, I noticed when I mount it on Nikon cameras, it fits very easily, but it does seem like when you try to traverse the focus, it is a little tighter than normal. That's not totally uncommon. I think the same is true with my Kimura lens, and honestly, some of the longer Nikons, like the 85f2 is one that's pretty tight. It's a pretty big, heavy lens, so it doesn't turn all that easily. And same with the 105f2.5, even bigger lens, actually a little bit lighter, due to the way it's built and its nature and everything. So with those bigger Nikon lenses, you can't really use that sort of focusing ring that's on top of the camera to focus them. And you normally can use that with lenses like the 35s and 28s and 50s on the Nikons. When I put the Canon on, I really could not use that little focusing wheel on top to focus it. I had to manually focus it with I say manually, I guess you're always manually focusing it, but I had to actually focus it via the barrel by manipulating the barrel. And I don't mind this. I do this a lot anyways because it's just a lot faster than using that little wheel. It's very slow, and it's got sharp edges, and it can kind of wear on your finger after a while. So this didn't really bother me. That's normally how I shoot anyways. And I gotta say that when you shoot like that with this lens, it really works very well. If you look at the lens, I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it very well, but it has something called clamshelling, where the focusing ring is kind of uneven. It kind of dips in and out, and the parts that are dipped in have sort of a rough, sort of jagged edges that give you a little bit of grip. And I really like this design. It was used a lot in a lot of Japanese-made lenses from the post-war era, and some of the more obscure European lenses. And actually, Nikon used it a lot on their early F-mount lenses. I believe most of their pre-AI lenses had this kind of clamshelling on it. And I really like it. I think it looks cool. I think it feels really good in the hand, but for some reason, Nikon never put it on any of their rangefinder lenses, which I always found a bit odd. But Canon decided to go with that style for this lens, and I really like it. I think it feels really nice in the hand. It looks pretty cool. Another thing they did is they went with a more standard, I guess a more modern aperture ring, where if you look at it, it's sort of an external aperture ring. It has two little tabs on the front to help you move it, sort of like a Leica lens. And again, I really like that. It's very easy to move, and it's very easy to see because all you have to do is glance at the camera kind of from the top, and you can usually see it. It's on the top and bottom. So you'll usually have it in sight, and if it's not directly on top of the camera, you can just turn it. It's off to the side a little bit, and you can adjust it. And I kind of prefer that to the system that a lot of the early Nikon rangefinder lenses, where the focusing ring is kind of just built into the front of the lens, and you actually have to look into the inside of the lens to get the aperture. So it's a little bit easier to use than those lenses. So I have to give them credit. They designed it really, really well. And even things like the little clip on the side that holds the lens in place. That's one of the most distinct features on the Nikon rangefinders, and you don't really see that on any other camera, with the exception of, the Contax cameras they're kind of based off of, and some of the Soviet knockoffs. But that's kind of an odd feature. And on most of them, it's a very small tab that kind of runs parallel to the lens. And when you look at it, you think, oh, well, that's obviously the right way to do it. But surprisingly, when you're turning the focus, a lot of times you'll kind of clip your finger on it and it'll get in the way. And I've actually kind of knocked lenses out of the mounting a little bit doing that before. And with this Canon one, you'll notice that it's much flatter and much drawn out, which doesn't look like a great design. It seems like you'd catch your finger on it, but I've actually found you're less likely to catch your finger on it because it's more flat against the camera body and not so much against the lens. So in my mind, it's actually kind of a better design, even though it doesn't necessarily look as pretty, and it's not exactly, when you think about it, it doesn't look like the design is as nice and intuitive, but I think it's actually a slightly better design feature right there. So you got to give them credit. They definitely thought about this lens before they made it. They didn't just throw this together out of some spare parts they had laying around and slap them on some sort of adapter. They actually went to quite a bit of trouble to engineer this lens in a unique way that was something more on par with like a Carl Zeiss or a Leica lens that I guess they were hoping to sell in Europe and America. And I got to say, it works really well on the Nikon. I did have to take, and I was using it on my Nikon SP because the Nikon SP has that little that secondary viewfinder that kind of covers 28 millimeters. It's not perfect, but it's good enough, and it's the only camera in the range that can really do that on any level. When I first put it on, like I said, it was a little tight, but I knew that helicoil in the camera was kind of tight, so I opened it up and I kind of tried to clean it out a little bit and added a little bit more oil and loosened it up some. And when I put the lens back on, it seemed to work a lot better. It's still a tiny bit tighter than I'd like, but I don't think I'm going to get it much better. With these old cameras, sometimes you just got to accept that they're not exactly in prime condition. But everything about the lens, I gotta say, I really like it. Even the chrome, a lot of times that's something you'll hear about with some of the European cameras, is they would kind of change the chrome formula. Cameras made in 1952 versus a lenses made in 1956, they would have changed the chrome formula, and one will look more yellowy and one will look more blue kind of, and they don't really match. But I have to say that Canon, their chrome matches the Nikon chrome very, very well. I can't definitively say it's a perfect match. I doubt it is. But just looking at it, when you look at it indoors, they seem to go fine together. And when you look at it outdoors under direct sunlight, again, they seem to go fine together. Probably not perfect one-to-one color matching there, but they did a really good job of using the same type of chrome, so it matches the chrome body cameras really well. So all in all, I gotta say I'm pretty pleased with this lens. When I got it, it actually came with the original leather case and a Canon viewfinder. So that was kind of neat to get the entire set with all the accessories, but I didn't really use the viewfinder. Like I said, I used the internal finder on the Nikon SP, which seems to have worked pretty well, and I think the results are pretty darn good. So I think I've gone on for long enough now. I've got some sample images. You can just keep looking at those. So tune in next time. I got a lot more coming up, and hope you enjoyed this video.